All right. Well, it has hit the top of the hour, Greg. So, like any good tour or travel program, we like to start right on time. It's great to see everyone saying good morning and hello, and it sounds like everyone can see or hear us, which is great. We do recommend if you have a headset, it's sometimes a better way to hear us as we go through today's webinar. In case I haven't met you before, my name is Corey Marshall, and I'm fortunate to be the account director for the Canadian market for Oregon. And I am joined live on location today from Portland, Oregon, by Mr. Greg Eckert, who's going to take us through today's training in just a few minutes. Today, it's a great opportunity to extend your knowledge for when we are all back in action selling holidays experiences. I've been working with Travel Oregon for 11 years and spent a ton of time traveling around the state. From what you'll see today, I've been fortunate to hike it, bike it, ride it, family holiday it, ski it, craft beer tour it, and road rally it. It is truly an exceptional spot. After today's webinar, Greg and I are both here to help you build itineraries and be the connection between you and your clients and all that Oregon has to offer. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions as we go along today, please go ahead and type those into the question box on your screen. We'll try and answer them as we go along or at the end. And if there's any we don't answer, we'll be following up on email. Before we start the official training today, as you would have seen, we have a couple of Oregon family prize packs to give away today. But you have to be here at the beginning and answer our questions, and you have to be here at the end and answer our questions. So on the screen, you're going to see a few questions that we have for you to start today. If you can go ahead and just click the box for each of our questions and then hit submit at the bottom as we go through, that would be great. Have you visited Oregon? Yes, you've loved it. Not yet. It's on your bucket list. Question 2 is, have you sold Oregon to your clients? Yes or not yet. And question 3, how would you rate your knowledge of Oregon? Excellent, good, could be better, or poor. I'm just going to give you a little bit longer to have most of you be able to respond. Just make sure you hit that green submit button. Looking good, guys. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to you for a few moments and turn you over now to our resident Oregonian, Mr. Greg Eckert from Travel Oregon. Greg, over to you.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks. Good morning, good afternoon to those of you in the eastern part of Canada. And again, I guess it's not even morning anymore. It's lunchtime here in Oregon as well. So to our friends in BC and in the western parts of Canada, good afternoon as well. My name is Greg Eckert. I am the Director of Global Sales at Travel Oregon. I have been working with our destination for many years. I've worked in Canada, definitely. And want to thank you all for your time today. I know these are certainly unique times, but we appreciate your commitment to expanding your knowledge base, learning more about Oregon as a destination and how you can better offer the Oregon experience to your clients. Before we get started, we're going to roll a video, one of my favorite videos. It's short, it's about a minute and a half. Highlighting kind of an exaggerated version or an only slightly exaggerated version of Oregon. Some of you may have seen it, particularly those in Western Canada. But Bailey, if you want to go ahead and roll that, I'll jump into the presentation immediately after. All right, so there you see mine and Corey's mugs, spending time in Oregon and in other locations. If anybody can guess who that Sasquatch is, that might be worth a prize as well. So I'll go ahead and just jump in here. If you're not 100% familiar with U.S. geography, Oregon is on the west coast, right between Washington and California. We like to call ourselves California's Canada. Many people think it's the best thing about the West Coast, and I like to think that they're right. Our state is comprised of 7 diverse regions, so we'll sort of break it down that way to make it easier for folks to understand how we're laid out. It has the ocean, mountains, valleys. We have high deserts. We have cities like Portland, which we'll jump into first, and small towns that are gorgeous and dot the coasts and the valley and all over. Our chat today, again, will outline all of the amazing aspects and key selling points each region and hopefully, each region has to offer, and hopefully provide you a glimpse of the unique flair and ambiance each of those regions provide. As I said, to make things a little bit easier to navigate, we've divided Oregon into 7 regions, so you may want to visit all of them, or your clients may want to visit all of them or a few of them. And I'd recommend doing so. But we have found that breaking the state up this way makes it easier, again, to figure out which parts are special and maybe more appealing to your customers. So I'll start with the largest city, my home, and the largest city, again, in Oregon. It is also the state's cultural capital. It's famous for the energy and diversity that it has, an excellent music and art scene. Also is a spectacular setting, perched just about 90 minutes inland from the Pacific Ocean, and this great volcanic backdrop of Mount Hood that you see here. Portland's incredibly vibrant and quirky, but cosmopolitan as well, and it has a small town warmth to it that I don't think that we see in a lot of other cities on the West Coast. It's also known as the U.S. most livable city, where it's very eco-friendly. Again, those cultural offerings we have in the city are incredible. There's just great little cafes situated in wonderful little neighborhoods with bistros and brew pubs all around, and with easy access to outdoor activities. As you can see, Portlanders do have the privilege of really enjoying Mother Nature's serenity as a background of their everyday life. Here you'll see a photo of folks cycling on Tom McCall Waterfront Park. While cycling is a great way to get around and a good way to see the city, we do have some incredible local tour operators as well, and they provide custom, private access to experiences throughout Portland and Oregon, for that matter, and working with those experience providers is probably the most reliable way to ensure that your clients have been delivered your promise of memorable, life-enhancing vacations that are free of stress and concern. As I mentioned, a great way to get around the city is via bicycle, and yes, we have experience providers and local sightseeing operators for that too. Portland has about 505 kilometers of bikeways, so of course, I do think getting around by bike is the best way to get around. Portland also has the nation's highest percentage of bike commuters. The bridge that you see in the background is the Hawthorne Bridge. And the Hawthorne Bridge sees about 12,000 bike commuters a day on normal days. So again, a fantastic way the city sees the city is by guided tours. So getting an insider's exploration of the city from a company like First Nature Tours or America's Hub World Tours or another outfitter is a great way to do that. Or you can also see the city from a cozy heated seat on a riverboat aboard the Portland Spirit, which runs along the river there that you see in the image. They also offer cruises on the Columbia River, including a new Bigfoot or Sasquatch themed cruise. You'll find a lot of adventures throughout Oregon, and you'll learn more about those later today. But I also really like to think of Portland as providing a sort of a vivid soundtrack to those adventures, whether that's an independent record store. Yes, we still have those. They even sell vinyl records, if you can imagine that. But it's also comes alive in independent clubs like the Doug Fir, Mississippi Studios, and at outdoor concerts and festivals. Well, Oregon's cultural hub is Portland. It's also home to a sprawling urban wilderness and forest park. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner. And the world's smallest dedicated park in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. That's Mills End Park. Portland really does offer visitors a breath of fresh air in a lot of different ways. There are more than 200 parks within our city limits, from forests to marshland trails to some of the most world-renowned skate parks for skateboarding in the world. Just delaying on the slides there. Sorry, folks. Portland is also home to the oldest official continuously operated public rose test garden in the United States, the Rose Garden in Washington Park. Just located minutes from downtown, the Rose Garden boasts about 10,000 rose bushes and incredible views of Portland and the surroundings as well. They even have an on-site gift shop dedicated to all things roses. This was a tough one for me because it's something that I love so much, and it's really part of who I am as an Oregonian, and that's my love of Portland and Oregon's beer scene. The tough question here was, which brewery should I feature? I will leave this one unnamed. I think some folks that have been to Oregon have probably been to this brewery, but Portland's beer scene is incredible. It's enormous. We have more craft breweries per capita than any city in the U.S., and the tasting scene, again, is enormous, full of beers of different styles, different profiles. If you're the type of person who likes to do everything, we can pretty much promise you that's not possible as it relates to our beer scene, at least in a weekend anyway. At last count, there were about 77 breweries in Portland and just 177 in the region of Portland alone. So that doesn't include like just regular tap houses, which are wonderful places for tasting, etc. With the right direction, though, you can kind of find a beercation with minimal planning and logistical hassle any time of the year, especially in wintertime. It's a great time for craft beer. That's when brewers are developing dark beers, and tour operators are still also providing brew tours. As I said, Portland has kind of a different number of nicknames. You saw us talking about the Rose Garden. Rose City is one of the nicknames. And then in this case, Beervana is another nickname, also Bridgetown for the number of bridges. Like those names, Portland is incredibly unique. It has world-renowned chefs, hundreds of food carts, art in theaters and outside on the street. We have the world's largest independent bookstore in Powell's Books. And Portland really isn't your typical city. And if it wasn't different that way, it wouldn't really be Portland. So we're always fiercely proud of how different Portland is. Moving on to the Oregon coast. Consequently, as many of you already know, Oregon is a fine state for a road trip. That's either as a continuation of a journey through California or just as a destination unto itself. Highway 101 follows the Oregon coast throughout, passing in the south near the Redwoods in California, but it's dotted with lighthouses like you see here. We have about 9 of them on the coast that are easily accessible. And the thing that I really like about the coast is thoughts kind of fade away. You've got wind-swept shoreline, soaring sand dunes, which I'll talk a little about later, and some incredible state parks, but also these kind of sentinel-like sea stacks, which you can see and experience all over the Oregon coast. Really doesn't get much more coastal in the region. Thanks to Oregon's pioneering beach bill many, many years ago, all 584 kilometers of our coast are free and remain open to the public, like you see this gent here. But it's also an adventure. There's a lot of opportunities, so there's endless opportunities to comb the beach for agates or glass floats that may have washed up on the shore. You can even work with a local artisan in one of the communities on the coast to make your own glass floats. You can even catch your own Dungeness crab. Pictured here is Kelly's Marina, which is a favorite among visitors and locals alike, but it's a place where you can rent a boat or a crab pot, go and cook your own crab there from Kelly's Marina, um, or catch your own crab, excuse me, from Kelly's Marina, and then bring it on into the space that they have dedicated for cooking it on your own as well. As you can imagine, being the coastal place that we are, it's a great place to watch for whales, seals, sea lions, puffins, or just leave your own footprints on the beach. There's incredible sightseeing operators as well that provide whale watching cruises and sea life cruises, and a great way to kind of wrap that around is by a visit to the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Another favorite pastime on the coast for visitors and locals is riding a fat bike at the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. Those fat bikes provide opportunities for all skill levels. And on the coast, you can kind of find flat pleasure cruises or a strenuous freestyle off-road adventure. The conditions change a lot. There's steep terrain, there's flat terrain, as I mentioned, hills, it's fun. The coast is dotted with fat bike rental shops and even local experience specialists and guides that are eager to share their favorite local spots. And again, kind of continuing on that theme of the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, it's a 64-kilometer length of rolling sand that has huge sand mountains that tower about 152 meters in the air. And it's the largest concentration of sand dunes in the U.S. It's really unique to most coastlines throughout the world. As Oregonians, we really take advantage of this playground and encourage visitors to do that as well. We do that on boards and wheels, as you see here. But on the board side of things, our friends in Florence, Oregon, on the central coast, invented the sport of sandboarding. It's kind of where longboard meets the sand dunes and snowboarding for an epic and fun sort of downhill ride. One particular section of the coastline you won't miss, especially, or your clients won't want to miss, especially if they're into photography and just seeing more dramatic landscapes, is the Samuel H. Boardman Scenic Corridor on the South Coast. This corridor is a 19-kilometer forested linear park with a rugged, steep coastline that's interrupted by small sand beaches. It was named in honor of the first Oregon State Park superintendent because he and others of his generation felt that sharing this really shining coastline was integral to conservation in the state, and they felt that sharing it and saving it with the public was the best way to maintain and preserve that for legacies of generations. That area is also home to 300-year-old Sitka spruce groves and trees, Arch Rock and Natural Bridge sea stacks, and 43 kilometers of the Oregon Coast Trail, which is not quite a contiguous trail, but it's getting there, and that goes the length of the coastline in Oregon through those giant coastal forests. Excuse me. It's a beautiful place, and it's a great place to admire kind of what maybe First Nations villagers, and people were thinking when they saw this coastline and how inspired they may have been at the time as well. And moving onward with no real cadence or direction in an itinerary, I'm just kind of noticing that now, but happy to put itineraries together with all this content for you if you're interested. But moving on to Mount Hood and the Gorge. This is a region where Oregon's tallest mountain meets our biggest river, the Columbia River. You have a full force of inspiration there, whether it's, again, hiking among those trees, visiting farm stands on one of our food trails in the East Columbia Gorge, visiting a cozy cabin or a resort, snowshoeing, or enjoying the winter wonderland that is that around Mount Hood. Mount Hood itself is home to 6 ski areas on the longest ski season, also home to America's largest night skiing at Mount Hood Ski Bowl. I'll give you some images of that here in just a moment so you can see what that looks like. Mount Hood, as pictured before and also in the Portland photos, is the 4th highest peak in the Cascade Mountain Range. And that ridge kind of runs north through south through our state, and it's just great for snowboarding and skiing. Pictured here, you see Timberline Lodge, which was built during the Work Progress Act in the 1930s as part of the Great Depression. And then on the right, you will see that night skiing at Ski Bowl, which is a great experience. If skiing isn't really your speed, or your client's speed, there is some great family activities at Ski Bowl. They call it cosmic tubing, which is inner tubing at night with disco lights, and they even have their own inner tube lift with music, and it's a lot of fun, especially for those that want to enjoy the winter activities, but aren't necessarily interested in hitting the slopes. For an incredibly private and intimate event, if you have clients that are looking for unique venues to host rehearsal dinners or weddings, I highly recommend the Silcox Hut on Mount Hood. It's a miniature version of that larger Timberline Lodge. It was also built during the same time. You can see it pictured here with the Timberline Lodge cat, the snow cat, which takes you to that space. They have their own chef, so if you have interest in that, please let me know. I'd be happy to follow up with photos and what that programming looks like. So we talk about this as the Hood Gorge, and you've heard me reference the Columbia River Gorge. The gorge was designated a National Scenic Area, the largest in the U.S., and that's for good reason. You'd really be hard-pressed to find any vistas as good as these. At the western edge of the gorge, which you're seeing pictured in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, the view from Crown Point really is a front row seat to the mighty Columbia River, which just unfurls and cuts through the Cascade Mountains here at the gorge. From there, you have access to dozens of just incredibly awe-inspiring waterfalls that spill from those basalt cliffs of the Columbia Gorge and line the historic Columbia Gorge Highway, the Columbia River Highway. Very famous on the right is Multnomah Falls, but also Bridal Veil, and one of my favorite on the left, La Tourelle. I've actually stood underneath that waterfall years ago. It was quite cold, but incredibly refreshing and amazing just to think that I could have this experience of standing beneath my own Cascade waterfall without really anybody there. Amazing. But the Columbia Gorge isn't just spectacular scenery. You heard me reference the Eastern Gorge food trails, but there's all kinds of things there too. So great handcrafted beer, farm stands on the Mount Hood Fruit Loop, which is a great farm stand loop through the Hood River Valley, and great dining too, using those ingredients from the farms that are available. Thanks to its unique geography, the gorge also boasts a world of wine on its own, whether that's Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, or in the cool Western Hills, or in the hotter, sunnier, drier east. We grow Tempranillo and Syrah grapes there too, and it's incredible. So speaking of wine, the Willamette Valley is a great place to explore a farm to fork scene, food scene, paired with our Oregon's legacy of Pinot Noir wine. There's great ways to build an appetite doing that too, whether that's canoeing or horseback riding to or from vineyards, cycling or hiking. There's many ways to do that. Those the wineries in our area range. They go from shiny and sleek to rustic and intimate. The 500 tasting rooms here in Oregon's largest wine region make for a world-class touring experience. Again, with private tour operators offering and public too offering tours throughout the valley. During those tours, people have the opportunity to discover the difference between the wine growing regions that are just in the valley, whether that's the Chehalem Mountains or the Yamhill Carlton region for growing. And here's a little vintner secret that a lot of people don't always think about when they're thinking about wine country. Winter could be the best time to visit the wine country. After the final grape clusters are plucked from the vines, the vibe and the tempo slows down, but the tasting rooms, most of them are open and eager to welcome visitors that time of year. The Willamette Valley is a great place to hike trails also through old growth, and see waterfalls like you see here, pedal down scenic backcountries in small towns through covered bridges. They're tight. The communities are tight knit and talented. So take your time admiring their creativity, and you might meet some of these winemakers or other makers in the region. Um, it's also Eugene is the largest city there in the Willamette Valley, and will host the 2022 World Athletic Championships for the first time ever in the United States. The Willamette Valley also plays host to what we call the crown jewel of the Oregon State Park system. And once you visit Silver Falls State Park, you'll know why. It's a real standout scenic treasure, puts Oregon kind of firmly on the international stage as a beautiful place to visit. There's all kinds of recreational opportunities, even camping in that area. And it's just an hour east of our state capital of Salem, which is in the valley. And it's a very popular state park, but incredible to visit. And I can't think of a lot of other places where you can walk behind a waterfall. It's difficult to see in that image, but you can walk on a nice, very well-worn trail behind that waterfall. The region also hosts some of our more interesting adventures for the young and young at heart. The Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum is best known as the home of the world's largest wooden flying boat. The Hughes H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose. That museum is made up of 3 buildings, including space, and they have a water park there as well that's indoor. But they play host to the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane, among others. There's about 200 historic aircraft, spacecraft, and exhibits on display there. The other location that I love is in Albany, Oregon. You'd be hard-pressed to find another carousel or as colorful and creative as that Albany carousel. It's got historic machinery and this kind of whimsical herd of animals. You see the salmon that those of us in the Pacific Northwest and Cascadia know and love. Those are all painstakingly carved by hand from the museum's team of volunteers. It's one of the biggest draws in the valley. You can take a spin with one of those animals for $2, get food from their cafe, or book even one of their 2 party rooms if you have a private group that's interested in it. I think the most fascinating feature of the Historic Carousel and Museum is the workshop. They have a team of volunteers that are busy there carving and restoring and painting animals and wooden details, and you really get the chance to get up close, see the animals as they're being made or restored, and just kind of look around and go, wow, the tables are covered with wood shavings, and there's still drawings here from some of these older ones, outlaying color details. It's a really incredible spot. Pumpkin patches in the fall are also a great draw. The Rogue, quote, pumpkin patch is part of Rogue Brewing's farm program. The pumpkins that they grow in their pumpkin patch, they roast, and then they put directly into the pumpkin beer that they brew later in the season. So it's kind of a fun closing the loop story, but and still offering cool opportunities for family and those of us that like to enjoy beers in the fall. Next up is Central Oregon, as the name implies, right in the middle of the state. And it's a place where adventure really thrives in this kind of sunny high desert that's filled with landscapes like this at Smith Rock State Park and snowy peaks at places like Mount Bachelor, which is an incredible ski resort. There's all kinds of thrills to find in this region, whether it's those powdered slopes of the volcano of Mount Bachelor, down rivers like this on the Deschutes, or at the summit of sky-high mountains. Or if your life is a little bit slower, on one of the world-renowned golf courses in Central Oregon. There are plenty. I am eager to share some of those with you. One of my favorite resorts in Sun River has, I think, 3 golf courses associated with it. There's about 35 golf courses in that part of the state. So easy to find good golf recreation there. And again, it wouldn't be Central Oregon again if I didn't show you pictures of the Cascade Mountain Range. You can see the 3 sisters there. The public art in Bend that's dedicated to the spirit of adventure that this region has. You can see that with the kayak. Again, great cycling, but also beer. Bend has its own beer trail, and it's called the Bend Ale Trail, and it's a way for anyone really to go and experience the wealth of breweries, brewers' knowledge, and local information too. It's a great place to get ideas for your next mountain bike ride or place to hit the golf lanes. So many adventures around every corner in Central Oregon. This one happens to be dog sledding, excuse me, but so many other ways to experience the region, and whether that's on foot behind a team of dogs or on your bicycle or in a boat. And our nearest region to the state of California is Southern Oregon. The past is really honored kind of with new riches here. They have their own wine country. They also have great food trails, world famous theaters in Ashland at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and wild and scenic rivers with beautiful, colorful landscapes that look like they were painted. Southern Oregon has a lot of adventures, including probably their most well-known adventure is Crater Lake National Park. It spreads out around the deepest lake in the USA, that's Crater Lake, as you see pictured here, which are actually the remains of a vast volcanic caldera that were formed by the collapse of Mount Mazama about 7,000 years ago. That collapse of that mountain created a caldera that fills with snowmelt. The lake is not filled by a stream or a spring, it's all snowmelt. So they get a lot of snow there, as you can imagine. It is open year-round. They have free snowshoes that you can borrow and free ranger-led snowshoe tours in the winter, too, if you're interested in visiting in the winter. Southern Oregon is so much more than that, though. Kind of the feather in Southern Oregon's cap, if you will, is the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland. And staying at places like the Ashland Springs Hotel, which you see there, and visiting Lithia Park, which is nearly in the backyard of the Ashland Springs Hotel. It's just an incredible, surreal place to visit. I like coffee about as much as I like beer. One of my favorite coffee roasters is in Ashland. It's called Noble Roasting. If you ever go there, please reach out to myself. I know Corey's been there as well, so reach out to us and let us know, because we would love to share tips about what our favorite things are to get there, and they sell coffee for takeaway there as well too. You need to just buy the beans and have them at home. Oregon has a long boating history, especially in this section of Oregon, where the rivers really were the communication pipeline. They were the internet of the day. So companies like the mail boats and these folks, Hell's Gate jet boats, which is this company, travel on the wild scenic Road River, and in the past that's how mail was delivered, was using these jet boats that can travel in very shallow water. Boaters on this trip are treated to stunning scenery, wildlife, and tales of Oregon's history, and also some fun too. They do these kind of hair-raising 360-degree spins on those jet boats, and it's a blast. Hellgate also offers a variety of experiences that include dinner cruises to their own private cabin in the woods. It's a cabin that seats probably about 200 to 300 people. They do a beautiful barbecue. They take you out there on the boat. That's the only way to get there is with the rogue boat. It's only accessible on the river. So a beautiful place to visit and see. If a slow trip is more your speed, check out the Paddle Pub in Grants Pass, Oregon. That also runs on the Rogue River. That's a fun trip too, because you get to try the local Southern Oregon beers while you're paddling your own paddle pub. Southern Oregon is also home to its own incredible wine and culinary scene in places like Central Point. It's a great place to stop for an award-winning Rogue Creamery Oregon blue cheese and a bottle of Ledger David Cellars Chenin Blanc. In the Artisans Corridor, there's great chocolate there as well. Nearby is Jacksonville, Oregon, dubbed one of America's top 10 coolest small towns. The entire town is a historic district because there was a gold rush there. I love the Jacksonville Tavern, you see pictured here. A couple of doors down from that is the oldest barbershop in Oregon, and if you can believe it, I did actually have my hair cut there at one point. There's also a lot to do in Klamath Falls nearby, like scenic hiking, mountain biking, golfing also at 4 different famous golf courses, freshwater fishing, and Oregon's longest zip line. There's also the oldest birding festival in the United States. If you're interested in seeing more than 350 bird species in one place, like you see this eagle here, Klamath Falls is a great place to visit. Any of those towns that I've mentioned in Southern Oregon are an excellent base camp for adventures at Crater Lake National Park, and I'd love to provide suggestions or recommendations for lodging and any other experiences of all types, whether it's dining, shopping, or sightseeing, and in anywhere that I've talked about today. And last but not least is Oregon's corner of the Wild West, Eastern Oregon. In Eastern Oregon, real wide open skies and sagebrush plains and craggy mountain ranges claim the landscape. There's a vast outdoor playground here, also skiing, of course, fish like steelhead, great wildlife, incredible kind of hearty cowboy meals, and incredible craft beer as well. For a dose of history, there are wagon rats from the Oregon Trail outside of Baker City, Oregon, also home to its own gold rush in the 1800s. Prehistoric fossil beds in places like John Day Fossil Bed National Monument. And just great stories waiting to be uncovered. Whether that's in Pendleton, where you have saddle makers and boot makers, beer and whiskey and vodka distillers. Pendleton has a real craft culture that's driven by its pioneering spirit. And it's one of the most well-regarded maker cultures in the state. Our cities have incredible maker cultures as well, and they've seen the rise of those artisan-driven businesses in the past 10 to 15 years. But we like to say that Pendleton's makers were here long before it was really cool. And they're still around to show you some of those ways that they share their culture with everybody. I would also say, and be remiss if I didn't say, don't miss one of Oregon's 7 wonders when you travel to the Painted Hills. I'll show another better photo of that toward the end of the presentation here. But you can see millions of years of geologic history in layers of rock. And they get their names from these delicately colored clay in the soil that are yellow, gold, black, and red. Best to see in the late afternoon. That's when you get the reds. But other times of day, even if it's cloudy, you get purples and blues and still get those oranges that you can see pictured here. The other beautiful thing about Eastern Oregon is that you do have the ability to enjoy the hospitality of the people that have lived on this land for more than 10,000 years. You can learn about their culture at the Temeslik Cultural Institute outside of Pendleton. You can also learn about cowboy culture at things like the Pendleton Roundup. I know we were chatting earlier about whether or not the Calgary Stampede has its own catchphrase. I know it's a bigger rodeo, but the Roundup does have its own catchphrase, and that's "Let her buck." So that's kind of what we like to say when we're thinking about just whether that's getting people excited to come here or just saying, hey, let's go do something. If you're out in Eastern Oregon and somebody just says "Let her buck," be ready and be ready to hang on, because you're going to be in for one hell of a ride. So I have a couple of links up here on the screen. If you need more ideas or inspiration, please visit our website, traveloregon.com. You'll also get a link to a YouTube playlist. That is our Moments of Zen. Those are the Oregon Moments of Zen. And I think you're probably going to see one of those as we wrap things up. But I have been, in this age of COVID-19 and Zoom, been playing some of those on my internet browser in the background, just to either hear the music or hear the sweet sound of rain falling at the Japanese garden. So I would encourage you to do that. Again, encourage you to reach out to us. I'm easily reached. I have a very easy email address. It is Greg, Greg, at traveloregon.com. And look forward to hearing from you. Want to help you, want to help your clients, and want to deliver those really inspiring and memorable vacations to your customers. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Greg, so much. And hopefully, everyone, we've given you some helpful information on what makes Oregon so special. Before you go, and as a reminder from the start of today's webinar, we do have a few more questions for you to test your knowledge on Oregon. We're going to bring those up now, and by correctly answering these questions, you stand a chance to win one of our 2 Discover Oregon family prize packages. I know some of you have been asking about links and everything else, and we'll be sending out an electronic direct mail follow-up tomorrow with our contact information, obviously, and a link to today's recording and as well. So please go ahead on the screen now and answer the questions that we have for you. The first one being, the 1985 American adventure comedy film, The Goonies, was filmed in Portland, Astoria, Salem, or Eugene. And no Googling, guys, just type it right in because this does have a time limit on it. Question 2, what is the name of Oregon's only national park and the deepest lake in the USA? Again, just answer right on the screen for us. Crater Lake, Timothy Lake, Diamond Lake, or Deep Lake? And question 3, what is the tallest mountain in Oregon? Is it Mount Hood, Mount Bachelor, Mount Jefferson, or Mount Rainier? Oh, we love Canadians giving everyone else the answers. All good. Amazing. Just hit submit at the bottom. And thanks again, Greg. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please go ahead and sign up for next week's webinar, which is going to be a focus on Utah. We'll also be in touch tomorrow with our prize winner announcements and more food recipes from our chefs in Oregon. In the meantime, as Greg mentioned, we're going to finish today to leave you a little bit inspired, maybe a little bit relaxed with a moment of Zen video. So please enjoy that. And thanks again, everyone, for your participation today.
Thanks, everyone. How did I do?